Welcome to the Motoring Podcast, your weekly discussion of motoring news. This is episode 522 on Tuesday, the 25th of April, 2023. Hello, I'm Alan, and I'm all alone once again this week, I'm afraid. Andrew's still not completely there. I mean, he's getting there. He just can't actually speak yet. So he's not able to join me today. Never mind though, as ever I'm filling because I forgot to fill in the menu part. This is a terrible thing whenever you divide up tasks between two of you and one of you is not here. The one that doesn't do that task normally kind of forgets until the very last second. Anyway, we'll be talking about three different things and some other stuff this week. So let's start off. There's no follow-up. It's straight into new news. And as some of you might have noticed, pretty much as soon as I finished recording last week, Jaguar Land Rover had a big announcement. And it's kind of, I still haven't really worked out what the announcement was about. I suppose really it was just to tell people that Jaguar isn't quite dead yet. But that's not what the big, that's not what the big takeaway for everyone was. The big takeaway was this strangest thing. Jaguar Land Rover declared that it was rebranding as JLR in a company image shift, and that it was going to market its cars under four brand umbrellas: Range Rover, Discovery, Defender, and Jaguar. And you'll notice from all of that the words Land Rover were missed out, and this caused much panic and anxiety on the internet. Up until the point where some people from JLR clarified it and pointed out that really it was, when asked what's going to change, really the outcome was not much. The announcement marked JLR as a house of brands, with the four brands I've just been through, as underneath that, but in reality, the showrooms are going to be, Jaguar and Land Rover showrooms. If you want to look for these cars, you'll go to landrover.com or .co.uk or whatever the appropriate local flavour is. It seems like an internal brand treatment memo, which seems to have been circulated to the world and as a result misunderstood. Really, those of us who want to buy stuff, it doesn't matter. It's another one of these times. I think Professor Sir Jerry McGovern seems to want to make it like the brand house, like LVMH, so Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy. And he seems to be getting confused between handbags and cars again. JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, whatever it's called this week, whatever it's branding its house as this week, is really all about building cars. And selling cars, and sometimes I do think that gets lost. I'm not even going to go into the four words of ness that were rolled out to talk about Jaguar styling and design in the future, and I'm not even going to talk about CEO Adrian Mardell said the place that Jaguar wanted to be was the Jaguar of 32 years ago, which just seems surreal. So it was a very strange announcement. I really doubt whether or not it should ever have taken place, to be perfectly honest. I guess maybe somebody had to say something, as nothing had really been said for a while. Very, very strange. So I'm going to move on before I offend anyone else. But yeah, there we go. Meanwhile, in the vicinity of Gaydon and Royal Leamington Spa, former Ford boss Stephen Armstrong is rejoining Aston Martin. Stephen was previously a Ford of Europe chairman. When he retired from that at the end of last year, he's worked with a number of different companies across different industries. Sharing some of his experience. I mean, he within Ford, he held senior positions in Africa, China, Europe, India, the Middle East, North America, and South America. He was chief operating officer at Volvo when it was sold to Geely. So he's been around, he's seen a lot, he's had an awful lot of experience. So he's back as a part-time consultant at Aston Martin, joining Amedeo Felisa at their former Ferrari boss, of course. Interesting one. Aston Martin, it's worth mentioning. They issued additional stock and all sorts of things. At one point, the share price was as low as 90 pence. It's now up to 235 pence per share. So yes, investors seem to think that the Aston Martin has a good future right at the minute, and it's nice to. It's still not great numbers per share, but it's much better than it was, and I hope that the current team is resteadying the ship. It got rocked pretty heavily for a little while there, but it does seem to be steadying out. I hope that comes through. That shows in cars, that shows in volumes, that shows in sales, because that's a good thing. Next up in British, great big inverted commas around that, car news, INEOS. They are looking to expand. They've actually selected Magna to build a small electric four-wheel drive from 2026, working with Magna Steyr to develop and obviously to build at least to start with, a smaller vehicle than the Grenadier. So let's see what happens. It would be really nice and really interesting if it moves away from that sort of defenderness, and actually, we see INEOS try to actually develop their own style with their second model, and hopefully learn from some of the challenges. I think that came out with some of those production stroke very late prototype Grenadiers that people drove recently. The Autocar story, which we linked in the show notes, is illustrated by a really quite good Photoshop of a short wheelbase Grenadier, but I don't know if that. I hope that's not what they do. I hope they do something more innovative. Did I mention electric? I can't remember. I should have said it will be a small electric off-roader as well. So that will be interesting to see what they do there. I really hope, as I said, they move away from that. Let's copy the defenderness, which admittedly was the reason for INEOS Automotive's, I was going to say initiation. That's not the right word. Founding, I suppose. Really for their founding. Lots and lots of British car news, actually, today. This time, Aston Martin and McLaren are going to be forced to sell electric cars in the US, says Autocar. Strict new emission rules mean low-volume car makers can no longer benefit from higher CO2 allowances. So what's actually going to happen here is that the US government is going to end the special dispensations it has for low-volume car manufacturers, because right at the minute they have very high targets for CO2. It's something that they shouldn't ever really have much challenge actually making. But instead of that, that's going to disappear, and so that they're going to have to sell electric cars as part of proposals here to slash vehicle emissions. That loophole has been good for Aston Martin, for Lotus, for McLaren, amongst others. They can sell higher emitting cars on average than volume makers. Now that's true, but they still have the same vehicles. Or pretty much the same vehicles still have to meet other standards around the world. So I don't know that opens up an awful lot. This push means that these manufacturers will have to sell on average 2/3 of EVs by 2032, which is when this small volume manufacturers agreement comes to an end, when it's phased out. That doesn't seem very hard, really, does it? Especially given that in the UK, they're not expected to have the same dispensations as in Europe right at the moment. So we'll see just what happens. I mean, the market in the US is very, very high for pretty much all of these vehicles. So really, you know, compared to other places, I mean, I'm not saying it's like Toyota or Subaru or something, but it's quite high for compared to other countries. So let's just see what happens there. I mean, many of these companies will be developing electric vehicles anyway. I mean, Lotus, for example, with the I never get the name right, the Elettra. is already well on the way. It's unveiled. It's been launched. I have not seen one on the road yet, but I think they're starting to get out there. Aston Martin and Ferrari are saying they'll launch EVs in 2025. McLaren haven't said anything yet. Is there the chance that we could have a new Signet style setup where a vehicle from another brand is rebadged and rebranded as one of these supercar companies, just to keep people happy? Well, possibly. But on the other hand, if they're meant to be selling 2/3 EVs, it's going to have to be a stronger offering, I think, than that. But that said, it's not impossible, I suppose. I mean, they just have to be a little bit clever about how they do it. Yeah, but we'll have to wait and see. But the date for this is much further out than others, than other countries. So some of this stuff may well already have come into force before manufacturers need to roll it out for the USA. So a story in The Guardian last week about the ULEZ and the challenge that it is causing for drivers of foreign registered vehicles, particularly if it's a hire car or if it's a lease vehicle. It's become an issue. So if you drive a vehicle into the ULEZ, then if it's an older, more polluting vehicle, you have to pay £12.50 a day, or you face a fine of £180. That's halved if you pay within 14 days. But vehicles that are UK registered don't have to enroll separately. It turns out if you're driving a non-UK registered vehicle, even if it's compliant with the ULEZ, you have to register it individually. You have to add it to the list. And if you haven't done that, you will still get fined as if you're a more polluting vehicle, and you'll still get the punishment, and you'll etc., etc., etc. Where this really becomes a challenge is where vehicles are they're unregistered, and then they're incorrectly identified as older heavy diesel vehicles, and those can end up with fines of £500 to £2,000 a day, depending on weight, and will rise if they're not paid within 28 days. So if you're driving a vehicle which is ULEZ compliant but not registered in the UK, there is always that risk that the cameras will magically misassign it. Not so bad when it's registered to you. When it's registered to a hire company or something, it can take some time for the fines to get back to you. Because then it'll go to the hire company, who'll then forward it on to you, and that can take weeks and weeks and weeks. All of that time, you'll be paying punishment charges. The fines will be going up. There will be extra levies on top of it. Non-payment charges and stuff. And that's what left a chap called Christian Ducarry driving a French registered hire car that was ULEZ compliant in London for 5 days. And as a result, he ended up with a fine for £3,598 in the first place, and then three further fines for £7,371.04. It's about £11,000 of fines, because by the time they actually got to them, then got to him, it was outside the 28 days appeals deadline. Just ridiculous. TfL has outsourced the fine part of all of this to Euro Parking Collection. That really doesn't fill me with faith that they're going to be a wonderfully ethical company. And it's been sending out fines all across the EU for ULEZ breaches. TfL has told The Guardian, here I'm quoting, that those who could demonstrate their vehicles were compliant would have their fines cancelled, and it expected EPC to act reasonably over payments and appeals deadlines if PCNs were delayed in the post. Supposedly that's not necessarily been happening. Lots more in this article. It's really quite interesting in a bad way. But we'll link to the show notes. We'll link to the article in the show notes, as you would expect. Curious one next. This has ended up in the running order 2 weeks in a row, so I didn't kill it this week. Devon and Cornwall police are launching drones to monitor unsafe driving. The idea is that the drone will spot unsafe drivers, or the drone operator will spot unsafe drivers, and will alert a police unit to have someone intercept the person who is doing poor driving, and send it to a patrol to stop that vehicle and deal with them accordingly, according to Chief Inspector Ben Asprey. Supposedly it can spot motorists from 3.7 miles away. It just seems a little bit weird, this one. Hovering drones on the off chance of catching people. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to target specific roads, perhaps specific times of day, maybe possibly even specific types of vehicle. This story is a little bit on the older side. It's from 9th of April. So it said drones be focused on motorcycles across the Easter weekend. So I imagine that popular biker roads, for example, may well have drones hovering above them, and then they can relay that footage down, and the people who are stopped by the patrols can have the footage shown to them. I'm sure that's all that will happen. Let's just see. It just seems a little bit strange, to be perfectly honest. It seems an awful lot of manpower. Park up a police car, and that normally scares people into slowing down. But hey, what's the point in that when you've got something which is technological, like a drone, and is therefore better, it seems. Goodness me, I'm really channeling the spirit of Andrew this morning, aren't I? One last story before Guilt Minute. Gloucestershire Council is to start installing 1,000 charging points. Now, this is a curious one because it's lots of people are in favour of this, obviously. Lots of people are complaining about it as well. So the plan really is to get 1,000 electric vehicle charging points rolled out over the next 3 years. They're going to start out with the first 30 areas, which have been revealed, and they're going to include points in Cheltenham, Gloucester and Stroud. Some residents have raised concerns about the charging points taking up too much street parking space, but the idea really is that they're being positioned so that they're convenient for people who don't have off-street parking and don't have off-street charging ability. So yes, they are going to do that. BBC Radio Gloucestershire spoke to residents in Cheltenham about the plans. So if we did have an electric car, the points would not work for us in family life because the points would not be near enough to our house, a mother said. And another resident said, I think we need electric charging points, and I'm happy we'd see a couple, but I think having 4 and taking out what's currently 6 or 7 spaces is going to be an issue. 1 or 2 per street or area would be much better. I think what's interesting here is that actually, I imagine that by trying to put in more of them, then that does two effects. One is you're future-proofing to an extent, and the other one is by the fact that they're there, they should attract. Yeah, it's a little bit chicken and egg. They should hopefully attract people to say, well, actually, I could have an EV. It works. I can charge it in the street. Currently, the plans are as follows. Cheltenham is going to get 40 chargers spread across 3 roads. Gloucester, 20 chargers around the centre of the town, I believe. Stroud's going to get 16. Forest of Dean is going to get 16 in Cinderford and Newent. Tewkesbury's going to get 16. And then in the Cotswold, there's going to be some put in Cirencester and some in Fairford High Streets. So let's see what happens. I think it's a really ambitious plan. I think it's what other councils are going to have to do as well in time. And hopefully in a relatively short time. And I think that it's something that I don't want to do the whole people are just going to have to get used to it, because that makes me one of those tedious EV bores. But I think this is some street furniture which we are going to have to get used to being there. And I think that given the types of area of town that they're being put in, and I think that given the planned out future for new vehicles in all of the countries, almost, most developed countries, then I think they're going to have to be there, and I think we're all going to have to suck it up, says man who doesn't own or drive an electric vehicle. I think it's quite good. Just accessibility. The problem, of course, might well be people from outside the area charging, taking up the spaces. So that's that could be tricky. I think that's going to be the bit that jars it, is people just using those as parking spaces and blocking them up when residents could be using them for charging. You've got the other challenge. The parking garage here downstairs has low power charging points, and one of the challenges is just the time it takes. And by the time there's an EV6, a few Teslas, some other bits, often a Polestar down there. They all take quite a while to charge at the sort of low charging speeds, and I think it does sort of cause some aggro amongst people about they can't actually charge their car because other people are still charging their car, or people have charged their car and haven't moved yet. So I can imagine that playing out in streets as well in the future, but I think it's just something that we're going to have to get used to until we can magically induction charge our cars from anywhere by just like pointing or something at it, and I don't see that happening in the nearish future anyway. It's Guilt Minute, the quick break in the show where we ask for a tad of financial support to keep the lights on and the hosting running. If you feel the Motoring Podcast worth small consideration every month, then you can become a patron. Different levels of patron include different levels of commitment from us to you, including being able to watch the show recorded live. We also have a small range of merchandise in our spring store, from stickers to mugs and t-shirts. If you don't have any spare cash, we completely understand, then you can help us by following for free from a podcast player to receive every show as they're released, and by liking and rating the show in whatever way your podcast supplier lets you. If you've done all that, and some of you do, so thank you very much, then the last thing you can do is to recommend us to a friend or colleague. There we go, super quick and under a minute, because I'm nice to you that way. Couple of things in new car news. I'd really hoped to have Andrew to be able to chat through some of these, but he just isn't up to it, sadly. What did I want to talk about? Yes, first one here on my little list. Some of the announcements from Shanghai and New York as well, I think. Is that from New York? I want to talk about Lexus LM. Lexus has unveiled the next generation of its luxury MPV, and they're talking about launching it in the UK. UK version would have a hybrid, the 2.5 litre self-charging hybrid setup. So it would be an LM350H. It's a well-known power pack. It uses, it's a well-known power pack with a that produces 246 brake horsepower, 176 pounds-foot of torque, and has four-wheel drive, and then fit that essentially to an MPV. Now, why I think this is interesting is that the sort of big luxuries, I think, in the automotive world are quietness and space. And nothing gives you space like a decent MPV. And I think that the savvy super rich, or the savvy people who need to get about the place in comfort and quickness and privacy, would always have one of these smarter MPVs, smarter sort of van setups, rather than a saloon, which is hard to get in and out of. You're very much limited by form factor. In these situations, these sort of MPV, these sort of situations, then an MPV makes far, far more sense. Now, this new LM has the latest iteration of the Lexus grill of many teeth, but it's quite a smart looking thing. It's the kind of thing you could expect to see driving very quietly around city centres. This one is going to be available in two different versions. One of which is a 6 or 7 seat. I've now lost the numbers. The other one is a 4-seat iteration with two essentially airline style seats in the back. when I say airline style, I mean nice airline, business class style, as opposed to, EasyJet, like some of us use. So it's even going to be able to have a glass privacy panel between the driver and the people in the rear. So this is really going to be smart and subtle luxury, and really, really low key. Again, if you've got the version with more seats, you don't get the privacy glass or anything. You do actually have space for seating, but this is taking that sort of to the nth degree. I think it's going to be very interesting to see it sell in the UK. I mean, it's been on sale since 2002 in China, Russia, the Middle East. I imagine it's been on sale in Thailand, for example, where this kind of van is very popular. But here or in the UK, it's expected to go up against the Mercedes V-Class, which currently sells for about just under £70,000 in the UK. So I wouldn't be surprised if the pricing was somewhere in that bracket. But yes, kind of cool. Let's see. I'm really interested to see what this is like. So yeah. Yeah, I think it's just such a cool idea. Andrew would disagree with me because he just hates the idea of an MPV, which I don't know. I don't get. I actually I love them for the idea of the practicality and all these other things. But what do I get? I see it as a lifestyle vehicle, like in the as it would be advertised, as opposed to sort of way of hauling kids around and keeping the sticky sweeties in the back and nowhere near you and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I don't see it as giving up like some people do. What else? New Polestar 4. Again, people chatting about this one because it has no rear window to make it safer. The idea being, the Polestar 4 has a bit of a sort of SUV coupe type line, but without actually looking too tall in the side. And the idea is that it increases headroom for rear passengers. And I can understand why, because if you push that crossbeam back from where it would have been above the rear window, then the window gets shallower and shallower and shallower. But it also means that there's space in front of that for people's heads, rear passengers' heads and stuff, so you can actually brace a bit better down the back. It has a rear-mounted camera instead. It has wing mirrors, as you would expect. Some people find this strange. I mean, it sits between, size-wise, it sits between the 2 and the 3. So the Polestar 3 is forthcoming. It's quite big, and it looks a bit like a cross between the two of them. In most cars these days, by the time you've got the rear passenger, 3 rear passenger headrests across the middle, and the quite small rear window that is the result of a rising belt line, you can't really see out the back window anyway. So I don't know why people complain about it. Not just that, most vans don't have back windows either. As long as you've got decent mirrors, then it's not really a problem. This will also have one of the camera style rear view mirrors. Now, they are a bit love-hate. I think that they give a great view out the back, but when you drive with one for a little while, it's very difficult to refocus. Your eyes have to do more work, bizarrely, because whenever you're looking at a windscreen, you look in a rear view mirror, then in actual fact, the distance you're focusing on isn't just on the mirror, it's on whatever it is that's reflected in the mirror. So it's still quite a long distance, and that's why you can flick between, if you have a look in your rear view mirror, you can flick between the road and the rear view mirror and the road and the rear view mirror, and you don't really notice your eyes doing very much work. When it's a screen, you have to focus on the screen. So you're moving from something maybe 2 feet away to something 40 feet away, and to 2 feet and 40 feet. And that's quite a lot of work on your eyes. And that's the thing that actually it makes it uncomfortable, I think, if you're not used to it, because your eyes are expecting to focus a long way away and they're quite close. So that's one of the reasons people don't really like those mirrors very much. But if you're used to them, then they're really, really good. And, they can actually be kept cleaner than the view at the back and all these things, and much, much clearer because you don't have passengers' heads in the way and headrests in the way and all sorts of stuff. So I don't have a problem with that. I understand why people do from a psychological point of view, but I think from a functionality point of view, it probably works better than having a mirror, a window these days, which seems a little bit nuts. Changing tack slightly, Polestar 4 is going to be Polestar's fastest production car to date. You'll be dual and single motor versions, with single motor version fitted with rear-wheel drive. Most powerful version, which will be a long-range dual motor, provides 544 horsepower from its motors, and that'll mean you can get from 0 to 60 in just 3.8 seconds. So you'll be able to, drive through that wall far more quickly. Hasn't shared range targets. The long-range single motor is expected to be over 300 miles. Experience with similar drivetrain in the Volvo. Equivalent to Volvo XC40 means that there will probably be a significant penalty for wanting all that performance. Aim is that production will be started this year. Plans to commence production in China in November, and then launch in the US in 2024 with a target price of around $60,000, which isn't too bad. So let's move into points of interest now. A couple of stories this week. Lunchtime Read is a cracker. It's from the Autopian. It's by Adrian Clark, who's an automotive designer. And he's talking about the Mini. Right from Izigonis Mini right the way through, and the evolution to the current, only just kind of revealed after some people saw some spy shots, version with its funny rear lights. Really interesting read. We know that people are interested in automotive design. I know that I am, so hence one of the reasons we're including it. And just, yes. And he says that as an owner of Minis of a number of different generations. So yes, worth a read, worth a few minutes of your time on that one. I think it's a really good article, and really very interesting. So and it's not all filled with praise, but it's not all filled with criticism either. For any generation, really. So it's a nice balanced piece, I think. A list of the week this week is an Anthony Ingram one from Haggerty as ever. They seem to be the home of good lists right at the minute. And it's 12 classic beach cars that make every day a holiday. Obviously, there's a list of 12. They're very cool. I guess I should choose one. There's lots I hadn't heard of. But the one I'm going to go with is the one that pretty much everyone has heard of. Which is the Citroen Mahari, because I just think it's so cool. I would adore one. They just look so great in I was going to say in the right circumstances. That means when it's not raining or snowing. They do look so great, especially when you see them by the beach in the south of France. They're so cool. I would, whatever flavor of lottery garage people trying to make me pick, there's always a Mahari in there. It always has a reserved special place in any fantasy garage I create, and one day I hope it'll be in a real one, because I do think they are super cool. So my pick from that is Citroen Mahari. Loads of others you could choose. Very cool, great list, nice one, and we're worth 6 minutes of your time. And finally this week, kind of short on interesting and finallys right at the minute, but and finally this week is Pizza Museum is showing the coolest classic Porsches to mark Porsche's 75 years in making road cars. It's organised an exhibit of their most interesting cars dating back to the very beginning. Have a read. Anyway, that rounds us up this week before the banging gets too much worse. No particular parish notes other than thank you all for your support. I particularly appreciate it whenever it's all a little bit hectic and for reasons out with any of our control, it becomes a little bit more than normal to try to run the podcast. It's been great. So thank you very, very much. Andrew is actually alive, by the way. And I'm sure I'll get critiqued for saying that he was almost anything but, or even by confessing to the fact that he is alive. It's quite possible I'll get told off for that too. Hopefully back next week. Let's just see. Fingers crossed. He has been a poorly little soul. But it's not the plague, and he's not dead yet. So there is still hope. That said, don't forget that between now and next week, you can give us any feedback and share your thoughts with the show at Motoring Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, on Facebook, and on the contact page of motoringpodcast.com, the hub of all our activities. Remember, you can support us financially via Patreon, and please leave a review and rating on Apple Podcasts or however your podcast app lets you do such a thing. To get in touch with me, it's best to use Twitter. You can use Mastodon, where I'm at AJP Bradley. That's Bradley. To get in touch with Andrew, search for Cracked Windscreen on Twitter or Mastodon. And he will doubtless see your comments. We'll be back very soon. But until then, I've been Alan Bradley. In his absence, he's been Andrew Clues. And safe motoring.